Light before commitment, Los Angeles often appears first as light. Not the harsh light of noon, but the softer kind that settles in the early morning and lingers again at dusk. It stretches across low hills, parking lots, palm-lined streets, and glass storefronts with an ease that feels almost unearned. Long before one understands the city's structure or its habits, this light creates an impression of openness. It suggests possibility without demanding effort, warmth without obligation. In Los Angeles, light arrives before commitment, and for many, it remains the most persuasive argument the city ever makes. The earliest settlements in this basin noticed the same thing. Long days, mild winters, a climate that rarely insisted on urgency. Survival did not require the same preparations demanded elsewhere. Food could grow with less resistance. Shelter could be lighter, more temporary. Over time, this softness shaped a certain relationship to permanence. Buildings spread outward rather than upward. Streets wandered. Neighborhoods did not rush to define themselves. The land allowed delay, and the people learned to accept it. This sense of delay became a quiet habit. In Los Angeles, beginnings matter more than conclusions. People arrive with ideas rather than plans, images rather than schedules. They come to try something, to see if it fits. The city does not immediately correct them. It lets them linger in that trial period longer than most places would. This generosity is often mistaken for care. In truth, it is indifference paired with abundance. Distance reinforces this feeling. Los Angeles is not a city that reveals itself by walking through a single center. It must be crossed repeatedly, sometimes without clear reward. Neighborhoods exist beside one another without insisting on intimacy. One can live close and remain unknown. The city makes this easy. It spreads responsibility thinly, distributing attention so widely that no single place feels watched for long. Work in Los Angeles often mirrors this structure. It is frequently visible, occasionally theatrical, and rarely final. Projects exist in versions. Careers remain provisional. Even success can feel temporary, as if it were still being tested by the light that first welcomed it. The city rewards appearance because appearance is what travels best across distance. Substance takes longer to arrive, and by then attention may have shifted elsewhere. Yet beneath this surface, routines form quietly. People wake early to avoid traffic. They learn which routes forgive lateness and which do not. They develop private maps of grocery stores, side streets, cafes that feel briefly personal. These small habits anchor lives that might otherwise drift. Los Angeles does not provide many shared rituals, so residents build individual ones instead. The city becomes a collection of overlapping solitudes, each moving through similar hours without necessarily meeting. History here rarely announces itself loudly. It exists in the spacing between structures, in names that outlast their meanings, in neighborhoods that have been renamed without fully changing. Disasters arrive and recede with unsettling regularity. Earthquakes, fires, droughts. Each one briefly interrupts the illusion of ease, then fades into a story told less urgently than expected. Memory in Los Angeles is short not because events are insignificant, but because attention is quickly redirected forward. This forward motion is gentle rather than forceful. The city does not push, it suggests. Reinvention is not framed as necessity, but as option. You can begin again, quietly, without explanation. Few will ask what you were before. Fewer still will wait to find out what you become. This can feel freeing. It can also feel strangely lonely. There is a particular calm that settles in the evenings, when the light softens and the air cools just enough to invite reflection. From certain vantage points, the city looks almost still. Cars move like distant signals. Houses glow briefly, then dim. In these moments, Los Angeles seems less like a destination and more like a condition. A place where time stretches, where outcomes remain negotiable, where nothing fully insists on resolution. This quality has shaped generations of arrivals. Some stay long enough to build lives within its looseness. Others leave with little more than what they brought, carrying the light with them as a memory rather than a promise. Few depart dramatically. Los Angeles does not demand closure. It allows exits to feel unfinished, which often suits those who came without clear endings in mind. Understanding Los Angeles requires attention to this unfinishedness. The city resists being summarized because it resists being concluded. Its history is not a sequence of decisive turns, but a layering of attempts. Each era leaves behind traces without fully replacing what came before. The result is a landscape that feels perpetually provisional, even when solidly built. To understand the past here, one must observe the present carefully. The present holds the city's true continuity in traffic patterns, in housing sprawl, in the quiet acceptance of delay. The same forces that shaped early settlements still operate, softened but persistent. Light arrives, space accommodates, decisions wait. Los Angeles does not ask for belief. It offers atmosphere instead. Those who live within it learn, slowly, that atmosphere can shape lives as powerfully as structure. The city's greatest influence is not what it builds, but what it postpones. In that postponement, many find room to breathe. Others find only distance. Either way, the light remains. It continues to arrive each morning, indifferent to ambition, faithful only to geography. It illuminates beginnings generously, without promising what will follow. In Los Angeles, that has always been enough to draw people in, again and again, into a city that prefers suggestion over certainty and possibility over commitment. Land that resists settlement before Los Angeles became an idea, it was a condition. The land existed long before ambition learned how to approach it. Dry stretches broken by sudden fertility, hills that shifted light but not water, a coastline generous in appearance and restrained in practice. Settlement here was never refused outright, but it was never encouraged either. The land allowed presence while quietly limiting attachment. Early inhabitants learned this balance through patience rather than conquest. Survival depended on movement, seasonal awareness, and restraint. The ground provided, but unevenly. It rewarded attentiveness more than force. When later arrivals attempted permanence, they encountered a landscape that tolerated structures without embracing them. Foundations held, but certainty did not follow. Water was the first lesson. Rain arrived inconsistently, sometimes generously, often not. Rivers changed their minds. Streams disappeared without warning. Agriculture required negotiation rather than control. Over time, solutions emerged that bent distance and redirected supply, but the original imbalance remained. The city learned to exist by borrowing from elsewhere, an arrangement that shaped its psychology as much as its infrastructure. Unlike cities anchored by a single river or valley, Los Angeles spread across many small truths instead of one stable center. Each area behaved differently. Soil shifted from fertile to stubborn within short distances. Elevation altered temperature subtly but decisively. These variations resisted uniform planning. The city responded by expanding outward rather than organizing inward. Settlement became wide instead of deep. This horizontal growth softened the idea of belonging. When land does not insist on permanence, people hesitate to commit fully to it. Homes feel provisional. Neighborhoods feel revisable. Even long-term residence carries a sense of tentativeness, as if departure remains quietly possible. The land teaches this without words. It neither confirms nor denies intention. Earth itself occasionally interrupts the illusion of stability. Movement below the surface reminds residents that stillness is negotiated, not guaranteed. These moments are brief, unsettling, and quickly absorbed into routine. The ground shifts, then life resumes. Memory records the interruption, but does not dwell on it. The land does not dramatize its resistance. It expresses it calmly through periodic reminder. Fire follows a similar pattern. Growth appears lush, then recedes abruptly. The cycle repeats with little ceremony. The landscape renews itself without sentiment. Human structures adjust around this rhythm rather than mastering it. Settlement here means accepting that the environment has its own schedule, indifferent to expectation. Because the land does not demand density, separation becomes normal. Distance feels natural rather than imposed. Streets stretch, lots widen. Silence appears between structures. This spacing shapes social habits. Encounters require effort. Communities exist, but they form slowly and dissolve easily. The land accommodates solitude better than congregation. Over time, architecture adapts to this resistance. Buildings remain low, spreading rather than asserting. Even symbols of permanence appear lighter than their counterparts elsewhere. There is little stone confidence here. Materials favor flexibility. Structures are designed to adjust, to be replaced, to be revised. The land does not reward defiance. It rewards accommodation. This accommodation extends into daily thinking. Plans remain open. Commitments stay conditional. Futures feel editable. The environment reinforces this mindset subtly but persistently. It offers room without insisting on roots. People settle, but they do not always arrive. What emerges is a city shaped less by domination than by negotiation. The land does not yield itself completely, and the city learns to exist within that refusal. Expansion continues, but attachment remains cautious. Ownership feels temporary. Even history feels lightly held, as if aware that permanence would be presumptuous. To understand Los Angeles, one must accept that settlement here has always been partial. The land allows presence without promising belonging. It supports life without offering certainty. This has never changed. Modern infrastructure may disguise the negotiation, but it does not eliminate it. Beneath roads and houses, the same quiet resistance remains. The city grows not because the land invites it, but because people persist in trying. And the land, patient and unmoved, allows them to stay for a while. Arrival by imagination. Most people arrive in Los Angeles long before they arrive physically. The city is encountered first as an image, assembled from fragments that feel familiar despite having no personal origin. Sunlit streets, slow conversations, a sense of ease that appears unearned. These impressions precede geography. They prepare expectations quietly, shaping intention before experience has a chance to interfere. This imagined arrival has always mattered more than the actual one. Trains and highways deliver bodies, but imagination delivers belief. People come already convinced that something will happen here, though they may struggle to name what that something is. Opportunity, recognition, renewal. The words differ, but the structure remains the same. Los Angeles is expected to respond. The city does not rush to confirm or deny these expectations. It allows newcomers to remain suspended in anticipation. Nothing immediately contradicts the imagined version. The climate cooperates. The light remains persuasive. Distance disguises complexity. For a time, the city feels as promised, though the promise was never spoken aloud. Historically, this pattern repeated itself with each wave of arrival. Farmers, performers, laborers, dreamers of various kinds. Each group projected its own narrative onto the landscape. The land accepted these projections without comment. It neither corrected misunderstanding nor reinforced accuracy. It simply existed alongside expectation. Imagination fills gaps that geography leaves open. Because Los Angeles lacks a single defining center, newcomers supply one internally. They choose a neighborhood, a routine, a small circuit of places, and allow that limited experience to stand in for the whole. The city becomes manageable through selection. What lies beyond the chosen path remains abstract, unnecessary to reconcile. This selective understanding protects the imagined version longer than reality would otherwise allow. Disappointment arrives slowly, often diluted by distraction. There is always another area to try, another version of the city that might align more closely with expectation. Movement replaces resolution. Reinvention delays conclusion. Even those who arrive without grand ambition are not exempt. The city's reputation works quietly, shaping small hopes into larger ones without asking permission. A temporary stay begins to feel adjustable. A modest plan acquires a faint sense of potential. Los Angeles encourages this inflation subtly, not through assurance, but through absence of refusal. Work becomes one of the first places where imagination meets its limits. Effort does not always lead where expected. Visibility does not guarantee stability. Yet even here, the city cushions disappointment by offering alternatives. Another attempt feels reasonable. Another direction seems available. The imagined future shifts rather than collapses. This flexibility has consequences. When arrival is guided by imagination rather than necessity, commitment remains light. People stay partially invested, prepared to leave if alignment fails. The city absorbs these partial presences easily. It is accustomed to turnover. Continuity here depends less on individuals than on patterns of arrival itself. Over time, imagination becomes a shared resource. Stories circulate. Successes are amplified. Failures are softened. The city's image remains intact not because it is accurate, but because it is continuously replenished by newcomers who have not yet tested it fully. Los Angeles survives on this renewal of belief. Those who remain long enough eventually recognize the gap between image and experience. Some find a quieter satisfaction beyond the imagined version. Others leave, carrying fragments of the image with them, reshaped but still potent. In both cases, imagination has already done its work. Los Angeles does not promise fulfillment. It offers projection. It allows people to arrive believing that life might look different here, even if they cannot explain why. This belief, repeated across decades, becomes its most reliable structure. The city endures not because it meets expectations, but because it allows them to exist for a while. Work as performance. Los Angeles has always treated work as something to be seen as much as done. This is not cynicism, but habit shaped by distance, light, and the long tradition of arriving with an audience already imagined. Effort here often unfolds in public view, even when the work itself remains unfinished. Presentation becomes part of the task, not an afterthought. In many cities, work hides behind walls. In Los Angeles, it tends to surface. Conversations about projects happen in cafes, cars, waiting rooms, and on sidewalks between appointments. Progress is discussed before it fully exists. Plans are spoken aloud as if speech might help them settle into reality. This outward orientation gives work a provisional quality, always in draft form, always slightly ahead of itself. Historically, this tendency aligned easily with industries built on visibility. Entertainment formalized what the city already practiced. Auditions, pitches, rehearsals, and previews blurred the line between preparation and execution. To work was to be evaluated continuously, often without clear criteria. Success depended not only on ability, but on timing, alignment, and being noticed in the right moment. Yet this performance extends beyond any single sector. Service work, creative labor, entrepreneurship, even routine employment adopts a similar rhythm. Titles matter less than trajectories. What one is doing now is less important than what one might be doing next. Conversations lean forward. Introductions carry hints of future versions. Work becomes narrative rather than position. This has subtle effects on identity. When labor is defined by projection, the self remains adjustable. People learn to speak about themselves in flexible terms. They leave room for revision. This adaptability can feel liberating, especially for those arriving from places where roles were fixed early and rarely questioned. In Los Angeles, one can be unfinished without apology. At the same time, this openness creates quiet strain. When work is always in performance, rest becomes difficult to define. Even leisure can feel preparatory, another setting where potential connections might appear. The boundary between working and waiting dissolves. Many find themselves occupied without feeling secure, active without feeling settled. Recognition arrives unevenly. Some efforts are rewarded quickly, others linger without acknowledgement. Because outcomes depend partly on perception, disappointment is often internalized rather than attributed to structure. The city does not easily explain failure, it encourages another attempt instead. Persistence replaces reflection. Motion substitutes for resolution. There is also a softness to accountability. When work is framed as process rather than completion, consequences blur. Projects fade rather than end. Collaborations drift apart without formal closure. This can feel humane, even kind. It can also leave work unfinished in ways that accumulate quietly over time. Despite this, many remain committed to the rhythm. Performance offers protection. By keeping work slightly abstract, people shield themselves from definitive judgment. If something fails, it was only a version. If it succeeds, it can be refined further. Finality is delayed, and with it, the vulnerability that finality requires. The city's physical form reinforces this pattern. Long commutes fragment the day. Work is broken into segments separated by travel and interruption. Continuity is rare. Attention shifts easily. In this environment, sustained focus becomes a private discipline rather than a shared expectation. Performance fills the gaps that structure leaves open. Those who thrive here often learn to balance appearance with substance quietly. They develop private standards that do not rely on external validation. They complete work even when no audience is guaranteed. This discipline is rarely visible and therefore rarely discussed. It exists beneath the city's louder habits. Others move on, carrying with them a sharpened awareness of how work can be shaped by context. They leave understanding that effort alone is never the full story. In Los Angeles, work teaches people about timing, perception, and the limits of control. These lessons remain useful elsewhere, even when the performance ends. Work as performance is not deception. It is adaptation. It reflects a city where outcomes are uncertain, distances are wide, and attention moves quickly. In such a place, to be seen working is sometimes the only proof that work exists at all. Los Angeles did not invent this condition, but it refined it. Over time, it became normal to treat labor as something provisional, visible, and revisable. The city does not ask work to justify itself immediately. It allows effort to remain slightly ahead of result, trusting that something might emerge later. For many, this is enough. The price of appearances in Los Angeles, appearance is rarely dismissed as shallow. It is understood as currency, quietly exchanged long before words are trusted. Surfaces matter here, not because depth is absent, but because depth is difficult to verify at a distance. When people are spread far apart, when encounters are brief and often repeated only once, appearance becomes the fastest language available. This habit formed early. A city without a single center learned to communicate through signals that could travel. Clothing, posture, tone, confidence. These elements crossed neighborhoods more easily than reputation or history. To look capable was often more practical than to explain capability. Over time, this practicality hardened into expectation. Appearance in Los Angeles is not limited to beauty. It includes optimism, momentum, ease. To look as though one belongs is often enough to be temporarily accepted. The city grants short-term trust readily, then withdraws it just as quietly. This creates a rhythm of constant presentation. One must keep appearing suitable, relevant, intact. The cost of this is rarely immediate. It accumulates gradually. Maintaining surfaces requires attention. Adjustments are frequent. Small corrections become routine. People learn to monitor themselves, to remain legible to others who are doing the same. Exhaustion arrives softly, disguised as busyness. Yet appearances also offer protection. They allow individuals to move through uncertainty without exposing vulnerability too quickly. In a place where outcomes are unpredictable, control over presentation feels like control over circumstance. Even when inner confidence falters, outer coherence provides stability. This emphasis shapes relationships as well. Introductions are smooth. Conversations remain light at first. Depth is delayed, sometimes indefinitely. Trust develops cautiously, if at all. Many connections exist comfortably on the surface, serving their purpose without demanding more. The city does not penalize this restraint. It expects it. Economically, appearances function as early indicators. Opportunity often responds to perception before proof. Investment follows promise. The city rewards those who can signal readiness, even when readiness is still forming. This system creates openings for reinvention, but it also favors those already fluent in the language of presentation. Failure within this framework is ambiguous. When things do not work, the cause is rarely clear. Was the idea insufficient or merely insufficiently visible? Was the timing wrong or the signal unclear? Ambiguity allows hope to persist, but it also prevents closure. People try again, adjusting the surface rather than reassessing the core. Over time, some grow tired of this exchange. They retreat into smaller circles where appearance matters less. They find routines that reduce exposure. Others lean further in, mastering the craft of looking composed under pressure. Neither path is judged openly. The city allows both. There is a quiet irony here. A place often accused of superficiality demands constant effort to sustain that surface. Appearances require work. They must be managed, updated, defended. The ease they suggest is carefully produced. Nothing appears effortless without effort being hidden somewhere else. Those who stay long enough learn when to invest in appearance and when to let it fade. They recognize moments when being seen matters and moments when it does not. This discernment becomes a private skill, rarely taught, slowly acquired. Los Angeles does not insist that appearances replace substance. It simply places a price on visibility that cannot be ignored. Those who pay it gain access briefly. Those who refuse may still succeed, but more quietly and often elsewhere. In the end, appearances here are neither illusion nor truth. They are tools, shaped by distance, scale, and repetition. They allow movement through a city that moves quickly and remembers little. The cost is real, but so is the access it buys. Space as separation. Los Angeles is experienced less as a crowd than as a sequence of intervals. Between homes, between appointments, between moments of attention. Space here does not merely exist. It organizes life quietly, shaping how people relate to one another without ever announcing its influence. Distance becomes routine, and separation feels normal rather than imposed. The city's physical scale teaches this early. Streets stretch longer than expected. Neighborhoods dissolve gradually, rather than ending clearly. What looks close on a map unfolds slowly in practice. Time expands as movement increases. The result is a daily rhythm shaped not by proximity, but by calculation. Who to see, where to go, what effort is worth the distance. This calculation affects intimacy. Relationships develop with awareness of travel time, traffic patterns, and competing commitments scattered across miles. Meeting someone is rarely spontaneous. It is arranged, negotiated, postponed. Cancellations carry little drama. Distance absorbs disappointment. Separation softens obligation. Historically, this spacing emerged from necessity as much as choice. The land encouraged spread rather than concentration. Later growth followed the same logic. Expansion solved immediate pressures while creating long-term distance. Communities formed beside one another without converging. Each learned to function independently, connected by roads rather than shared centers. This structure produces a particular kind of privacy. One can exist here without being observed closely. Lives unfold without frequent interruption. This anonymity offers relief to some. It allows reinvention, quiet living, selective connection. For others, it deepens isolation. Absence of friction becomes absence of recognition. Work reinforces this separation. Long commutes fragment attention. Conversations resume where they left off days earlier, as if time between encounters were neutral rather than cumulative. Continuity becomes personal rather than communal. People carry their own narratives without much interference. Even public spaces reflect this pattern. Parks, beaches, cafes appear open, yet interactions remain contained. Shared presence does not automatically create exchange. People coexist comfortably without converging. The city does not demand interaction. It permits it. This permissiveness shapes social expectations. There is little pressure to belong everywhere. Membership is partial. Attendance is optional. Withdrawal does not require explanation. The city accommodates quiet absence as easily as visible participation. Over time, separation becomes internalized. People learn to manage their own distance, emotional as well as physical. Disclosure is paced carefully. Trust accumulates slowly. The city rewards those who can navigate closeness without urgency. Yet separation is not hostility. It is neutrality. Los Angeles does not push people apart. It simply does not push them together. The space between allows both freedom and forgetting. Connections must be maintained deliberately, or they fade without conflict. Some resist this by creating dense pockets of belonging. Small communities, repeated routines, familiar routes. These efforts succeed locally, temporarily. They require maintenance. Space does not protect them, it only allows them. Others accept separation as a condition rather than a problem. They build lives that function independently, intersecting occasionally without expectation of permanence. For them, distance becomes clarity. The absence of constant contact reduces noise. Understanding Los Angeles means understanding this quiet architecture of space. It shapes character as much as culture. It teaches patience, selectivity, and a certain emotional self-reliance. The city remains vast, not only in size, but in the intervals it preserves. Between people, between intentions, between moments of attention. In those intervals, much of Los Angeles quietly exists. Disasters was without memory in Los Angeles. Disruption rarely becomes inheritance. Events arrive with force, leave their marks briefly, and then recede into the background of daily motion. Earth shakes, hills burn, water withdraws. The city pauses, adjusts, and continues. What remains is not denial, but a particular way of remembering that refuses to linger. This pattern has repeated often enough to become familiar. Each disturbance feels urgent while it lasts. Attention narrows, conversations align. The city briefly acknowledges its shared vulnerability. Then, almost imperceptibly, focus shifts elsewhere. Routines reassert themselves. Traffic returns. Construction resumes. Memory loosens its grip. The land itself encourages this forgetting. Disasters here do not usually erase everything at once. They arrive unevenly. One neighborhood burns while another watches from a distance. One area shakes while another barely notices. The unevenness fragments collective experience. Without a single shared point of loss, memory disperses. Infrastructure reinforces this tendency. Repairs happen quickly where visibility demands it. Damage elsewhere fades quietly. New layers are added over old ones without ceremony. What was destroyed becomes inaccessible not through prohibition, but through replacement. The city builds forward rather than memorializing backward. This forward motion is not indifference. It is survival adapted to repetition. When disruption is expected, dwelling on it feels impractical. The city learns to absorb shock with minimal pause. Preparedness replaces reflection. Attention turns to what still functions rather than what failed. Media cycles accelerate this process. Images of destruction circulate intensely, then disappear. The city consumes its own crises quickly, leaving behind fragments rather than narratives. What remains is awareness without attachment. People know disasters will happen again, but they do not carry them actively. There is also a quiet trust in resilience. Structures are designed to sway rather than stand rigidly. Systems anticipate interruption. People accept temporary loss as part of the environment. This acceptance reduces panic, but it also reduces collective memory. When survival feels routine, commemoration feels optional. For newcomers, this can be unsettling. The absence of visible scars creates the illusion of immunity. Warnings sound abstract. Preparedness feels theoretical. The city does not insist on remembrance as instruction. It allows each generation to learn independently, often too late. Those who have lived through disruption recognize the pattern. They store supplies quietly, they note exits, they track weather changes with more attention than conversation suggests. Their memory is private rather than shared. The city accommodates this discretion easily. Over time, disasters become part of the background rhythm. They are acknowledged without being integrated into identity. Los Angeles does not define itself by what it has endured. It defines itself by what it continues to attempt afterward. This absence of memory shapes ambition. Risk feels normalized. Consequences feel distant. The city tolerates fragility without dramatizing it. In doing so, it maintains momentum but sacrifices depth of reflection. Understanding this quality is essential. Los Angeles survives not by remembering deeply, but by moving lightly. It absorbs disruption, then releases it. The ground shifts, the air burns. The city adjusts its posture and resumes. What is lost in memory is preserved in habit, and that, here, is considered sufficient. Invisible hands of the city. Much of Los Angeles functions without spectacle. Beneath the visible movement of cars, conversations, and ambition, there is a steady labor that rarely enters public imagination. These hands do not announce themselves. They maintain continuity quietly, ensuring that the city's looseness does not collapse into disorder. This work has always existed alongside the city's more visible pursuits. While attention gathered around images and outcomes, routines formed elsewhere. Streets were cleaned before dawn, systems were monitored, services continued without applause. The city learned to rely on this consistency without acknowledging it directly. Because Los Angeles is spread so widely, much of this labor remains unseen by design. Infrastructure operates across distances that few traverse intentionally. Water arrives from far away. Power flows through networks that disappear into hills and ground. Maintenance happens in fragments, handled by people whose presence is temporary and often unnoticed. Social structures mirror this pattern. Entire communities contribute to the city's functioning while remaining peripheral to its narrative. Work is done early, late, or out of view. Stability is produced quietly, without recognition proportional to its necessity. The city accepts this imbalance as normal. This invisibility shapes perception. What is not seen is often underestimated. Effort fades into expectation. Systems feel natural rather than maintained. When something fails, attention spikes briefly, then moves on once function resumes. Repair restores invisibility. There is a particular discipline required to work this way. Tasks must be completed without affirmation. Success is defined by absence of disruption. This creates a professional culture oriented toward reliability rather than recognition. Many find dignity in this quiet effectiveness, even if it remains unspoken. At times, the city's dependence on unseen labor becomes visible through absence. A strike, a delay, a shortage. Suddenly, routines fracture. People notice what they assumed would always be there. Awareness returns briefly, then fades again as normality resumes. The city does not memorialize this labor. It does not build monuments to maintenance. Instead, it moves forward, relying on repetition rather than gratitude. The invisible hands continue because the city requires them, not because it acknowledges them. This dynamic influences how value is understood. Visibility often outranks necessity. What is seen feels important. What functions quietly feels replaceable, even when it is not. The city organizes itself around this contradiction without resolving it. Yet Los Angeles would not endure without these unseen systems. Its scale demands them. Its looseness depends on their discipline. The freedom many experience rests on structures they rarely consider. Those who perform this work develop their own sense of belonging. They know the city differently, through routes, schedules, and systems rather than images. Their Los Angeles is practical, procedural, grounded in repetition. It exists alongside the imagined city without intersecting often. Understanding Los Angeles requires attention to what does not announce itself. The city's most reliable forces are not those that attract notice, but those that prevent collapse quietly. The invisible hands remain, steady and unacknowledged, holding the city together while attention moves elsewhere. Architecture that spreads Los Angeles does not rise so much as it extends. Its buildings seem less concerned with asserting presence than with finding room. Structures settle into the land rather than challenging it, favoring width over height, horizontality over declaration. This is not an absence of ambition, but a different understanding of how ambition should appear. From early settlements onward, construction followed availability rather than concentration. Space was abundant, and so buildings learned to occupy it loosely. Streets widened, lots expanded, neighborhoods stretched outward, absorbing distance rather than resisting it. The city learned to grow by dispersal, not by compression. This spreading architecture softened edges. Boundaries between public and private blurred. Homes opened outward. Commercial spaces extended into parking lots and sidewalks. Movement flowed laterally rather than vertically. The city became something navigated rather than observed from above. Unlike cities defined by skylines, Los Angeles resists summary from a single vantage point. There is no clear moment where the city declares itself complete. Each area feels provisional, capable of further extension. Architecture here rarely insists on permanence. It remains open to revision, replacement, expansion. This openness shapes behavior. When buildings do not dominate, people move differently. Attention remains level, grounded. There is less upward gaze, less sense of hierarchy imposed by structure. Power does not announce itself architecturally as clearly. Authority disperses along with space. The spread also reflects caution. The land's instability discourages vertical certainty. Low-rise construction adapts more easily to movement below the surface. Flexibility becomes a form of respect. Buildings are designed to endure by yielding rather than resisting. Over time, this approach created a city of fragments rather than monuments. Each area carries its own logic, scale, and rhythm. Architectural styles coexist without needing to harmonize. Continuity is provided by repetition rather than uniformity. There is a quiet humility in this design. Structures do not demand admiration. They serve, accommodate, and fade into routine. Even iconic buildings are often encountered incidentally, folded into daily routes, rather than set apart for contemplation. Critics sometimes read this as lack of identity. In reality, it is a different identity, one that values adaptability over declaration. The city does not ask architecture to define it fully. It allows buildings to be functional, temporary, and replaceable. Spreading also affects memory. When architecture does not cluster, history disperses. Landmarks are fewer. Change happens gradually, almost invisibly. What is lost is rarely mourned publicly. Replacement arrives quietly, occupying the same ground without demanding attention. Residents learn to attach meaning locally. A corner store, a familiar facade, a stretch of street. These small anchors replace grand symbols. Belonging becomes specific rather than collective. Architecture that spreads produces a city experienced in pieces. One never sees it all at once. One lives within a segment, then another. The city reveals itself through accumulation rather than overview. Los Angeles remains unfinished by design. Its architecture reflects this, extending rather than concluding, adapting rather than asserting. It does not stand as a statement. It continues as a process. Rest as escape in Los Angeles, rest is rarely framed as stillness. It appears instead as movement away from pressure, a temporary relocation rather than a pause. The city does not easily support stopping in place. Its scale and rhythm encourage retreat, diversion, brief disappearance. Rest becomes something one goes to, not something one inhabits. This habit formed quietly alongside work. When labor is visible and performance continuous, withdrawal feels necessary. People look for places where they are not required to explain themselves. Beaches, hills, freeways at night, dim interiors during bright afternoons. These spaces offer relief not through silence alone, but through distance from expectation. Historically, the landscape provided this escape readily. Proximity to ocean, desert, and mountains allowed movement without departure. One could leave the city without truly leaving it. This created a culture where restoration depended on relocation rather than interruption. To rest meant to change scenery. Even within the city, escape takes spatial form. Long drives serve as decompression. Routes become rituals. The act of moving through space without destination offers a rare sense of control. Traffic frustrates, but it also isolates. Inside a car, one can be unreachable without explanation. This private enclosure functions as mobile rest. Socially, rest is often disguised as leisure. Activities replace idleness, walks, meals, gatherings. The city is more comfortable with engagement than with absence. To be seen resting requires justification. To be seen enjoying oneself feels acceptable. Escape wears the costume of activity. Homes reflect this as well. Interiors are arranged to open outward, windows, patios, transitional spaces. The boundary between inside and outside softens. Rest becomes porous, interrupted by light, noise, weather. Complete withdrawal feels unnatural. The city remains present even in private moments. There is also a subtle anxiety around stillness. When possibility feels abundant, stopping can feel like waste. Rest is tolerated when it promises renewal, not when it suggests contentment. The future must remain active. Escape offers rest without admitting satisfaction. For some, this produces restlessness that never fully resolves. They move from place to place, routine to routine, seeking relief that always seems slightly elsewhere. For others, escape becomes a skill. They learn when to step back, how to disappear briefly, how to return without explanation. Los Angeles does not shame exhaustion, but it does not accommodate deep rest easily. Silence must be sought deliberately. Slowness must be defended. The city offers many exits, but few sanctuaries. Yet these exits matter. They allow endurance. Without them, the city's openness would overwhelm. Escape provides balance, even if imperfect. It creates space to breathe within a place that rarely stops inviting motion. Rest here is not an ending. It is a detour, a way to continue without collapsing. Los Angeles understands this quietly and supplies endless routes outward. People rest by leaving, then return, ready to begin again, carrying just enough distance to keep going. Starting over again, Los Angeles has always made repetition feel acceptable. Beginning again does not carry the same weight here as it does elsewhere. The city does not ask what came before, nor does it insist on explanation. One can arrive, depart, and return without ceremony. Each attempt is treated as a fresh version rather than a correction. This tolerance for renewal emerged early. Settlement itself was an experiment repeated many times. Industries rose, shifted, dissolved, and reformed. Neighborhoods changed identities quietly. Names persisted while meanings evolved. The city learned to absorb change without dramatizing it. For individuals, this creates a particular freedom. Mistakes do not attach permanently. Careers can be redirected. Personal histories remain negotiable. The city offers anonymity large enough to allow reinvention without scrutiny. Starting over does not require forgiveness, only motion. Yet this ease also erodes continuity. When endings are soft, beginnings lose gravity. Commitments feel provisional. People hesitate to invest fully, knowing that departure remains plausible. The city accommodates this lightness without resistance. Starting over often arrives disguised as adjustment, a new address, a new routine, a new direction framed as refinement rather than rupture. The city supports these transitions with its scale. There is always another area, another circle, another possibility that does not overlap with the previous one. Work reinforces this pattern. Projects reset, opportunities cycle. Failure rarely closes doors permanently. It simply redirects attention. This encourages persistence, but it also encourages delay. Final decisions are postponed. Closure feels unnecessary. Socially, reinvention is rarely questioned. Introductions focus on present intention rather than past experience. Identity remains fluid. This can be liberating, especially for those escaping definitions imposed elsewhere. It can also feel disorienting, leaving little ground on which to stand. Over time, some grow tired of beginning. The absence of accumulation becomes noticeable. Without lasting structures, effort feels unanchored. Others find comfort in the rhythm. They value adaptability over attachment. The city supports both interpretations without comment. There is a quiet cost to endless renewal. Depth requires duration. Trust requires memory. When everything remains adjustable, these qualities form slowly, if at all. The city trades stability for flexibility, and the exchange is not always even. Still, Los Angeles remains committed to the idea that another attempt is always possible. This belief sustains hope long after evidence thins. It keeps people arriving, trying, returning. The city survives on this repetition of belief as much as on infrastructure. Starting over again is not failure here, it is method, a way of staying in motion without demanding resolution. Los Angeles does not promise that renewal will succeed. It promises only that it will be allowed. Learning to disappear in Los Angeles, disappearance is not an act of defiance. It is a learned response to scale. The city does not notice absence quickly, and this indifference makes withdrawal possible without conflict. One can step back without explanation, reduce visibility, soften presence. The city absorbs this quietly. Disappearing here does not require leaving. It often means narrowing one's footprint. Fewer routes, fewer conversations, fewer obligations scattered across distance. The city offers enough room for this contraction. It does not press for participation. Silence is permitted. This skill develops gradually. At first, many arrive seeking notice. Visibility feels necessary. Attention appears to equal opportunity. Over time, some discover the cost of being constantly available. Exposure invites expectation. Performance invites judgment. Disappearance becomes relief. The city provides many forms of partial retreat. Neighborhoods where anonymity prevails. Hours when movement thins. Interiors that block light and sound. Even traffic offers a strange kind of invisibility, where presence is reduced to motion rather than identity. Work adapts to this as well. Careers pause without formal announcement. Projects go quiet. Messages remain unanswered without immediate consequence. The city's loose accountability allows retreat without penalty, at least for a time. There is dignity in this discretion. To disappear is to reclaim attention for oneself. It allows thought to settle. It reduces the need to perform. In a place that encourages projection, withdrawal restores proportion. Yet disappearance also risks erasure. The city does not track those who step back. It does not preserve their place. Returning requires effort. Memory here is short, and absence is easily mistaken for departure. Some accept this exchange willingly. They value privacy over permanence. Others struggle with the ambiguity, unsure whether they are resting or fading. The city does not clarify the difference. Learning to disappear shapes relationships. Trust deepens in smaller circles. Disclosure becomes selective. The city's vastness recedes as personal territory tightens. Life becomes quieter, more contained. This retreat does not signal disengagement from the city. It is another way of inhabiting it. Los Angeles allows presence to fluctuate without judgment. One can exist at the edge of attention and still belong. Disappearance here is not escape. It is calibration, a way to adjust scale to human measure. Those who master it learn to remain while being unseen, to participate without exposure, to live within the city without being consumed by it. Los Angeles makes room for this quiet survival. Living in draft form, Los Angeles rarely insists on completion. Lives here unfold as versions rather than finished statements. Plans are revised mid-course. Identities remain adjustable. What exists now is understood as provisional, open to refinement or replacement without apology. This sensibility is reinforced by the city's rhythm. Change arrives frequently and unevenly. Opportunities appear, disappear, and reappear altered. To remain fixed feels impractical. Flexibility becomes a form of intelligence. People learn to present themselves as adaptable, still forming, still capable of becoming something else. Work reflects this condition clearly. Projects are pitched before they are built. Careers are described in motion rather than position. Even success feels temporary, subject to revision. The city encourages momentum over conclusion. Completion suggests finality, and finality limits possibility. This draft-like existence shapes daily decisions. Commitments are made with an awareness of alternatives. Choices remain lightly held. The future is kept open not through indecision, but through readiness to revise. Los Angeles rewards those who can adjust quickly without visible strain. There is comfort in this openness. It reduces the pressure to arrive fully formed. Mistakes feel less binding. Growth can happen publicly without shame. The city tolerates learning in motion. At the same time, living in draft form delays satisfaction. When nothing is finished, fulfillment remains postponed. Achievement feels incomplete. Pride is tempered by the knowledge that revision may soon follow. Rest is brief. Reflection is often deferred. Relationships adopt similar contours. Connections begin easily but develop slowly. People reveal themselves in stages, uncertain which version will endure. Depth forms cautiously. The city supports this pacing. It does not rush intimacy. The physical environment reinforces this provisionality. Construction zones linger. Neighborhoods change character without formal announcement. What looks settled today may be altered tomorrow. The city appears perpetually under revision. Some resist this and seek solidity. They establish routines, invest deeply, build fixed lives within the city's looseness. Their stability exists locally, not universally. It requires intention. Others embrace the draft. They value movement over arrival. For them, identity is a process, not a destination. The city affirms this outlook without comment. Living in draft form demands tolerance for ambiguity. Certainty is rare. Progress is uneven. Direction shifts quietly. Los Angeles does not resolve these tensions. It accommodates them. In this environment, completion becomes personal rather than collective. One decides privately when something feels finished, even if the city does not acknowledge it. Satisfaction becomes internal, independent of external markers. Los Angeles remains unfinished because it does not believe in final versions. It continues, revising itself alongside those who inhabit it. To live here is to accept that becoming may never fully end, and that this, for better or worse, is considered normal. Expecting reinvention. Los Angeles lives with an assumption that change is not only possible, but likely. Reinvention is not treated as interruption or anomaly. It is anticipated quietly, built into the way the city thinks about time, effort, and identity. What exists now is rarely expected to remain unchanged. This expectation shapes behavior long before it becomes conscious. People speak about the future in conditional terms. Plans include exits. Commitments carry flexibility. Even stability feels provisional, something maintained rather than assumed. The city does not promise continuity. It prepares for adjustment. Historically, this mindset grew alongside repeated transformation. Industries rose and reconfigured. Neighborhoods shifted roles. Cultural centers relocated. What once defined the city did not disappear completely, but it loosened its grip. Los Angeles learned that permanence was unreliable, and so it learned to value adaptability instead. Reinvention here does not require crisis. It often arrives quietly, through gradual redirection. A career bends rather than breaks. A routine changes shape. A place acquires a new meaning without losing its name. The city absorbs these transitions without ceremony. This has emotional consequences. Hope remains active longer than evidence might justify. People stay because something could still happen. The future remains negotiable. Disappointment is softened by the possibility of revision. When one version fails, another might succeed. At the same time, constant expectation of change can erode contentment. Satisfaction feels temporary. Arrival feels incomplete. There is always another adjustment to consider, another improvement imagined. The present becomes a holding pattern rather than a destination. Socially, reinvention alters accountability. Past identities are not enforced. History does not bind tightly. People are allowed to outgrow previous versions without explanation. This can feel generous, even kind. It can also feel disorienting, leaving little sense of continuity. The city's openness reinforces this condition. Scale provides anonymity. Distance protects experimentation. One can try again elsewhere without confronting what came before. Reinvention becomes a practice rather than a response. Some resist this cycle by choosing consistency deliberately. They stay put. They repeat. They commit to versions of themselves that do not shift easily. Their stability exists quietly, almost privately, within a city that does not insist on it. Others embrace reinvention as survival. They adjust continually, aligning themselves with changing conditions. For them, flexibility is not optional. It is how one remains visible, relevant, or simply present. Los Angeles does not judge either path. It allows both to coexist without resolution. The expectation of reinvention remains in the background, shaping decisions even when it is not spoken aloud. To live here is to sense that change is always approaching, not urgently, but steadily. Reinvention is expected, not demanded. The city waits for it patiently, ready to accommodate whatever version comes next. Leaving without closure. Leaving Los Angeles rarely feels decisive. Departures here tend to unfold quietly, without the punctuation of final scenes. One moves away gradually, often without fully recognizing the moment it happens. A routine loosens. Distances grow longer. The city recedes without insisting on acknowledgement. This softness mirrors how arrivals occur. Just as people come with imagination rather than certainty, they often leave without conclusion. There is no single center to exit, no threshold that confirms separation. One neighborhood is replaced by another, one city by the next, without a clear line between them. Los Angeles allows departure to feel incomplete. The city does not ask to be remembered. It does not demand loyalty or nostalgia. It accepts absence easily. Those who leave are not followed by stories or questions. Their place is absorbed back into the flow. Someone else arrives, inhabits a similar space, and the cycle continues. This absence of closure can feel unsettling. Without clear endings, reflection is delayed. People carry fragments of the city with them without knowing what to do with them. Memories surface unexpectedly, a quality of light, a habit of distance, a sense of possibility that no longer applies, yet lingers. For some, leaving feels like failure, even when it is not. The city's openness makes departure feel like an unfinished attempt rather than a completed chapter. Others experience relief. The looseness that once offered freedom begins to feel unanchored. Leaving restores definition. Los Angeles rarely marks its impact clearly. It changes people subtly. Expectations shift. Patience stretches. Ideas of work, rest, and identity adjust without announcement. These changes persist elsewhere, often unnoticed until contrasted with different rhythms. The city's refusal of closure preserves its influence. Without a final reckoning, Los Angeles remains available as an idea. One could return. One could try again. The door never fully closes, even when distance grows. This possibility keeps the city alive beyond its borders. It exists in conversations, comparisons, and private memories. People speak of it conditionally, as if it were still in progress. Even absence feels provisional. Leaving without closure is not loss. It is continuity expressed differently. The city does not need those who depart to define themselves against it. It allows them to move on without resistance. Los Angeles remains what it has always been, a place that permits beginnings, tolerates endings, and refuses to insist on conclusions. Those who leave carry this refusal with them, often longer than they expect. The city fades, but it does not finish.